Okay, we're good. I'm going to sit up here to...
If there was ever a man who was generous, gracious, and good, it was my dad, the man. A human being so true he could live like a king, 'cause he knew the real pleasure in life to be devoted to and always stand by me, so I would be unafraid and free. There was ever a man who was generous, gracious, and good. It was my dad, the man. Ooh, ooh, was ever a man who was generous, gracious, and good. It was my dad, the man. A human being so true he could live like a king, 'cause he knew the real pleasure in life devoted to and always stand by me, so I would be unafraid and free. If there was ever a man who was generous, gracious, and good, it was my dad, the man.
And these service is a lot about, you know, the loss of the person, but it's also for the living. And my mom's got a big gap that we need to figure out how to fill. So I'm like in free fall now because I don't know what to do about it. But I want to invite Robert to sing a slightly modified version of Grandma's Hymns.
Yeah.
The modification.
On my list. Yeah.
Grandma's hands clap in church on Sunday morning. Grandma's hands play a tambourine so well. Grandma's hands used to issue out a warning. She'd say, "Don't you run so fast, might fall on a piece of glass, might be snakes there in that grass." Grandma's hands, ooh. Grandma's hands soothe the local lonely mother. Grandma's hands used to ache sometimes and swell. Grandma's hands used to lift her face and tell her, "Baby, Grandma understands that you really love that man. Put yourself in Jesus' hands." Grandma's hands. Grandma's hands used to have a piece of candy. Grandma's hands picked me up each time I fell. Grandma's hands, boy, they really came in handy. She'd say, "Maddie, don't you whip that boy. What you want to spank him for? Didn't drop no apple core. We love Grandma forevermore. To keep heaven waiting for." Grandma's hands.
Thank you, Robert. If someone dies, you don't have like a lot of time to plan the events to celebrate the life of the person. It's kind of like boom, boom, boom. We all been sucked into that whirlwind. And so, the loved ones of those who pass are in the wind in various parts of the world and countries. So it's not easy for everyone to be in this, to come together and celebrate that life. So I want to be able to share some of this experience with those who aren't able to make it today. So I'm going to have a few words to say about my dad, and then there's going to be a father's going to come in and lead us in some prayer as well. Now, the first and foremost, my father lived to be the provider of our family, and he worked hard his whole life. He struggled to get us out of Jersey City, which is where we were born. I'm glad we did, because when I got together with my friend, who I'm still in contact with from Jersey City, he told us that what they did for fun was run out and look for fights every night. And he actually wrote a children's book growing up in a rough city, Jerry McGrellis. And I'm glad I got out of there, because most of the people that we knew at the time were dead by the time he started telling me the stories, or on drugs or whatever on their way out. My father made it a point to get us into Carteret. And when he was a phone man, when the phone went on strike, he would line up multiple jobs. He'd climb on roofs, he'd put alarms in, and he was always a provider. He always wanted to keep the house up and maintain the house himself, and didn't know exactly what to do at all times, but he wanted to be able to shape the house that way. He was a scoutmaster. My mom was the den mother when we were in Scouts. He took us camping. He made sure we had vacations all the time. The main thing about my dad is that he would do anything for the three of us, and then for the grandchildren later. He lived to do stuff for us, and I regret that I probably imposed on him a little bit too much in that regard. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. And then when Carteret was faced with the prospect of the world's largest incinerator being built here, I threw a flyer out into the neighborhood. Like I mentioned my activism before. I threw a flyer out into the neighborhood about it, and it started getting a lot of response. And my mom and dad became like the lieutenants of our committee. Jim Falace was there too. Jim's here today. He was the after the whole incinerator battle, he became the mayor of the town, one-term mayor, unfortunately. But now my father agreed with what we were doing, but the real reason he was doing it was to support me. And my father actually got smacked a couple times in town over this. And I'm not trying to bring up old things. If there's people who are on the other side, that's all long forgot. You know, whatever our differences were are long forgotten. You know, I'm not trying to bring that up, but I'm just trying to talk about the kind of guy he was. He actually, when the mayor jumped over the thing and punched Jose in the head, my father was smacked by the son of the council member, because my father was trying to also join in on video. The Spanish channel caught it. My father was videotaping, and the council member's son smacked my father in the face, knocked the camera out of his hand. And another time, the mayor's nephew called my mom a very inappropriate name, and then attacked my father. They were trying to provoke my dad to attack him after they calling my mom an inappropriate name. But because my father didn't react to it, they attacked him. So he actually took blows for this town, I was like the main troublemaker. But we had like a good committee. We had unified all the sectors of the town. We had the whites, the Latinos, the Dominicans, the Indians. Everybody was united. We literally marched 1,000 people through the streets of Carteret. And my parents were on the front of this whole thing, and my dad was a big part of this. And he was there. He was always filming. I was looking for the pictures. I was hoping we would find a picture with him with remember the huge video cameras? Yeah, he would always have that on his shoulder filming all the action. And you know, and they even had a button that they made up said about Bob and Dad. I forget exactly what it said, but they had a button. They had a T-shirt about me, and then they had a button that said something about Bob and Dad. You know, I forget what it exactly said, but it was. I wish I had it. I should have bought them, because you know it would have been nice to have as a souvenir at this point. I want to talk a little bit about what happens when people die. And I'm going through this now, and we all go through it. And I don't think it's necessarily entirely bad, but again, you don't want to get consumed by it. But everyone around the loved one, we start evaluating what we could have done, or what we did possibly to contribute this. And if you let that take over, it could destroy you. But at the same time, the inclination is not necessarily a wrong thing. There's always things that we could have done, and there's always things that we could always evaluate. We could learn lessons from everything that happens. And I know that there's things that I did that you know, might have contributed to my father dying this past Tuesday. My father fell off my house. And here's an example of the kinds of things he did. He was painting my house. I was a selfish, you know, trying to get my house done, and I hired these people that were ripping me off, so we had to finish the job. My father offered to do it. He made his own choice to go up the ladder, but he fell off the ladder one day, and he broke his legs, and he broke his nose. And ever since then, he had trouble walking. So I have to live with the idea that, you know, when my father took that final tumble, my selfishness of having him help me in that way contributed to it. Now, I don't feel like it's my fault that happened, but it is the reality of all the things that happened before lead up to whatever happens next. You know, I took advantage of my dad, and I also, the other thing that I regret is that I wasn't more forceful with him in trying to get him to address issues with his legs and stuff, and perhaps the steps. You know, he fell down the steps. We all know he fell down the steps, right? He fell down the steps. He pretty much died instantly, although they weren't sure at that point. But I had no safety net for him twice. Once off the side of my house, and once off the steps. But the thing is, everyone's going to take a final fall someday, and we can be there as much as possible, and we can try to figure out how to prevent that from happening. But we can't catch everybody forever. It's going to happen to us all, and so therefore. Yes, there's probably things I should have done, and I should have been a better son. And the other thing I totally regret, I love my dad. Everyone expresses how much they love people after they die. I probably haven't told them that for years, if not decades. And why not? I'm not saying I never told them that, but why don't we tell each other that, you know? especially men, we have a hard time telling others that, and men telling men that. I have, Robert, I love you. Ethan, I love you. I know I didn't say it enough. Sue, I love you. I love a lot of people in this room, Mom. And I wish I would have said it to him more. And it wouldn't have made a difference, but he would have at least known that. He, you know, maybe he probably wondered. So my point of bringing this guilt thing up is not, the safety net, more the safety net issue up, is what I'm learning now and what I need to figure out. And if anyone has ideas, I'm open to it. You know, figure out how to get in contact with me or my mom or whatever. I have to figure out how to be a better safety net for my mom now, because my mom and dad, they did so much for each other. But they're both holding each other up, and they did. There's things that my mother did for my dad. She took care of most of the accounting. She watched over his health, because my mother, she should have been a doctor. She was a genius, but you know, she had to go to work to support her family in Brooklyn. But she studied the medical manuals, so she was like the unofficial doctor. You know, I'd call her up and she'd tell me, you know, she'd be able to diagnose me over the phone. So she knew more about my father's health situation than he did. My father, he survived a lot of stuff, aside from the fall off my wall. Throat cancer and chemo. He had a pacemaker. He had a stroke. He had, one time he was in the hospital with like 107-degree temperature, and we didn't know what the heck was going on. I don't think we still ever figured out what that was. He survived a lot, and he was still going. He never wanted to give up, like a lot of us, especially men. We don't want to step back from what we used to be able to do. But my father also did things for my mother, like a lot of driving stuff. A lot of the work around the house, and I'm at a loss now because I don't want to disrupt my mother in that house. I have to figure out, and we have to figure out, Jim, me, you, and guys, anyone else wants to help. We have to figure out how we can make a better safety net for my mother going forward. And so when we lose somebody, and we evaluate what we could have done. It's not necessarily entirely bad. I know everyone says, oh, don't blame yourself, don't blame yourself. And that's a good thing to say to people, because some people go too far blaming themselves and they end up in this depression spiral. We need to stay away from that. But what the positive that we could take from it is, what can we do now about the ones that we still have and about ourselves? Because the first and foremost safety net you need is behind yourself. Like, what are the things that we might be neglecting in our own lives that maybe we should be addressing? And not just physically and when you're going to die, but happiness and love and other things that are important for life. So when we can take a look at, well, what we could have done for them, and step back and say, well, what can I do for myself, number one, and I got to figure out what I could do for my mother and for the other people around me. And it's also okay to let more people who might not be part of your network of support into your network. And also to reattach yourself to other people who you may not be part of yet. There's nothing wrong with having, it doesn't always have to just be two people, or you don't have to be on your own. There's nothing wrong with trying to attach to each other and figuring out how to provide mutual support, not only toward survival, but toward happiness. Because, to use the metaphor, sooner or later we're all going to take that final fall, and we're going to miss the safety net. But we can all figure out how to delay that from happening, and what we can do to improve the quality between now and then. Like, start thinking, what are all the things that you always wanted to do that you haven't been doing? Start figuring out how to do them. Don't wait, because tomorrow's never going to get here. Figure out how to start doing this stuff now. Take care of your own needs, because you can't be much help to other people if your own life is in shambles. So if you're struggling, first try to right yourself, and then try to see what you can do to contribute to other people's improvement as well. And I think we all can, that's what I think, whereas it's not really necessarily a bad thing to think about what we should have done, because we can figure out what can we do next for our own loved ones and stuff. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened to my father. 2014, September, we lost his youngest son. And speaking of guilt, when I drove to their house and I came, my father was blaming himself because he had driven my son up to do some business work up northern New Jersey, and he had thought that if he had stayed with my son that night, it wouldn't have happened. It's true, it wouldn't have happened, but something else might have happened later. Like my father was having trouble walking, and he would start wobbling or get a little, and I was always nervous about the steps, and another thing, I should have done something about the steps, but he needed somebody to off in the back of me. He had fallen over a garbage barrel a couple weeks earlier, and but when I tried to arrange for somebody to help with the garbage, he started crying, and he didn't want me to do that, because nobody wants to admit that they can't take the garbage out. But so yeah, my father lost his youngest son, and that's got to be one of the most devastating devastating things to happen to a parent. And he thought, he was blaming himself, and he was just like he did for everybody, all of us. He did everything for Danny, everything he possibly could for Danny, and yet when it happened, he couldn't let go of the idea that was somehow partly his fault. They loved each other, my mom and dad, and moving on to my mother. They lived for each other, because the other person, even if you're having these challenges, when you're paired up with somebody, that's part of your project. It's almost like taking care of that other person. That becomes something that keeps you alive. That's a project that you're working on. It's a purpose in life. And they had that, and they did. And they always were watching out for each other. It didn't always come across that way. Jim could tell you all the things that Dad did for him. Dad loved Jim, and Jim loves Dad, and Dad tried to do everything for Jimmy that he possibly could. And the grandsons, he lived for those kids. He loved. He up until the last few weeks, he's making copies of Robert's music and giving me all these CDs of Robert's music. He was collecting it. He was a music collector. He would copy country music onto CD. It was something he lived for. He would listen to it and copy it, and it was like his hobby. He also had a toy car hobby, which I don't fully understand, but he has all these toy cars all over the house. He loved joking around with the boys, James, Robert, and Ethan. He loved giving them $20 to take the garbage out or something. He would, sneak them bills and, for like the minimalist of tasks. He loved going to Robert's shows. We used to have something called Parents of Young Musicians Association when Robert was very young, and Dad and Mom came to all the events, and we would get all the local parents that have musician children come, and we would do a little recital of all of us together. We would do them once a month. And I have to bring up the issue of the pool, the swimming pool, and this is like the saddest thing for me. It's almost a cliche. You've heard of the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. How many have heard of the book? Yeah. So it's kind of like a hipster cliche of people who maintain the motorcycle, and it's kind of like something that keeps them, gives them purpose. My father's version of a Zen and the Art of Pool Maintenance. Because nobody was swimming in that pool, probably for decades. But my father would climb in there, vacuum it, keep the filter running, keep the water quality, and I would come once a year to close it. I would swim a mile in there. I would swim back and forth 110 times, because that's what you have to do to swim a mile in that tiny little pool. I would swim a mile in there, and I'll throw the cover on. So for the last couple of years that it was open, that was the only swimming that took place in there. I would try to get Robert to go in there once in a while, but he usually didn't want. Ethan and James used to use it too. We all grew. Yeah, when we were young, we all used the pool. We loved the pool when we were young. Everyone loves the pool to a certain. I might be following in his footsteps because now I have the pool in my yard, and I'm the only one using it. And my pool is like 100 times back and forth for a mile. So I go in there. It's kind of like, to me, it's like a treadmill, but whatever. And here's the sad thing. This last year, I had offered to go open it for him a few times, and originally he wanted to, but then he said nah, and so we kept putting it off and whatever. So it ended up not being open. The day he fell, he finally got somebody to take the pool down. So now the pool's gone and he's gone. And when you look out the back window, and I see whenever I look out the back of my house and I see the pool gone, you know what I'm going to be thinking. So it's going to be a constant reminder. But it's almost like, and it's not. This isn't true, but it's almost like when you go a little crazy when someone around you dies. You start thinking like the pool was keeping him alive, and now without the pool. And he was happy that day. He actually called me that day to tell me about having the pool taken down, and I forget what else he was talking about. And I think he was happy that Ron gave us because the energy company was overestimating the bill because they didn't come out, and Ron gave me the estimate, and he was, oh yeah, they definitely was just whatever. So I given him the number, yeah. So there's that. So I don't know what I'm gonna do now. I'm like in an abyss, and I need help figuring out. I mean, it devastates my life, and I'm worried about myself too. But I'm also worried about Mom. That she's been a little quirky the last couple of days, I have to admit. And it's worrying me. It's worrying me. So I need to figure out things to. She's gonna want to boot my butt. She's gonna want a rebuttal time now.
Not true.
But seriousness, I have to figure out her with the steps, because she could be unsteady at times. The laundry's downstairs. Peggy uses our laundry once in a while. Peggy lives upstairs from us, and I love it that she does because. I
have all those stuff.
And I've already tried to impose on her and asked her to look. And she looks in on my mom all the time anyway. Well, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to go any further. But I know Peggy's there. Mrs. King, I saw her walking, and she used to walk with my mom. I said, look, even if you could schedule once every 2 weeks, take my mom for a walk, and if she's not ready, just sit down with her for 5 minutes, have a cup of tea or something. But I need to figure out a whole support network, and we need to try to catch as many of my mother's falls as possible in the days ahead, because I want to keep heaven waiting for Grandma's hands, and I need your help. But I also need your help to all take a look at yourself and figure out what you can do for yourself to delay that day for you, to push that day as far into the future as possible, but to put as much happiness between now and then, and do as many of the things that you want to do between now and then, because we all put off and oh yeah, I'd like to do that someday, but that when we do that, it's never going to happen. Figure out something you want to do and start making a plan immediately to start doing it. Call up, look it up. Figure it out. And not only ourselves, but think about the people around you that you're connected to, or the people you'd like to be connected to. And let's tell each other that we love each other more often. All right, I'm getting long-winded.